You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow Podcast. As always, I am your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, coming to you out of Lockhart, Texas. And our guest today is coming from far, far away from Lockhart, Texas. He's down under, as they say, from Australia. It's my friend of the show, Jason Mironchuk. He's the founder over at the 2-Bit Podcast, and his podcast, the King Pill Podcast, mine, we're all in, I guess, close-knit circles, you could say. Jason has been coming up with a lot of fascinating, interesting, well-articulated theories, ideas, concepts with his show, the 2-Bit Podcast. And I'm going to talk to him about a few of these things I find fascinating. The spirit of the age. We talk about that a lot on here in spiritual warfare and whatnot. We are exiting one spirit of the age and entering a new one. And we're going to get into that. The devouring mother has led us up to this disastrous point where we're at right now. But here comes the spirit of the vengeful son. And then we get into, are we even in a civilization at all anymore in the West? Why do people keep trying to save the West when it's kind of like the bitter ex-girlfriend? It's like, she doesn't love you anymore. The West is gone. And as Jason gets into, we are no longer in a civilization. What is that? So is that shocking? This is not meant to shock you or to blackpill you, to make you pessimistic. We get into a lot of optimism in this episode and what this means for us as a people, where we can go moving forward, and what caused a lot of these issues that we're up against right now. My friend and friend of the show, Jason Mironchuk, from what was known as the 2-Bit Podcast. We're going to go into that really quick here when we talk about your intro. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
I am very well, Buck. Thank you very much. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. Still the 2-Bit Podcast, actually.
It is.
Nothing's really changed. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, because the last thing I watched said at the end of the day, was it just that episode with Jay Burden?
No. So just like how we have Friend or Fed, which is a show within the 2-Bit Podcasts, there's Friend or Fed, which is a series that we do, which is a roundtable, sort of like, it's like Meet the Press, but based.
Yeah. But IQ above 80.
Right. Well, we're shooting for about 95. I bring the average down a bit, but we do what we can. And then so now I've started another series, which would be more of the interview series, which is I'm calling it At the End of the Day. For our Girardian listeners or anyone who is into Girardian memetics, they will understand what I'm doing with that, and other people will understand at some point. Not to toot my own horn, but it's
David Gronowski is going to get it, is he?
Yes, he is.
And then he's going to try to copy it somehow. No, that was
quite
bad.
Possibly. Yeah, quite possibly. He can spin it off. That's fine. I always look. I endorse anybody. I've seen a few Friend or Fed clones out there, and I'm all for it. Actually, I was hoping this would happen, but for anyone who's listening to this, who's thinking about taking that concept and running with it, please do. The only thing I don't even need credit for it. That's fine, but just be creative with it. Don't do friend or foe. That's lazy. Right. Yeah. Don't just find something unique and differentiate it a little bit. And then that would make me happy. I'll see that and go, yes, good. Good. We're winning hearts and minds, Buck. Slowly and surely, we're making inroads.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, it's going to be an interview series. Of course, we have the other thing we're doing right now with Matt King-Pilled Erickson, who I can't say enough good things about. He is better than me, and Matt's wife Amy can take that to the bank. We're doing a reading series with Mencius Moldbug's Patchwork, and combining it with a concept we're developing called civilizational capital, which I think we'll get into at some point in the show, in this conversation. And I think that's about it. And there might be another show we're going to add in March, maybe. I don't know.
Ooh, teaser.
I get up at 4:00. Yeah, well,
this is a teaser.
Teaser pleaser. Well, we'll see. I have a lot of these grandiose plans, and then I realize that I'm 46. I got a toddler, I have a full-time job, and there's only so many hours in the day. So I like to hedge my bets. But yeah, I'd like to do more with the time that I'm given. So we'll see. And of course, you'll know when we know.
And you're down under. For all the folks,
under.
I know I have some listeners way down in your area, or a few from your area that may not be there now. And let me ask you this too. I think I know the answer to this, but just to get it out there, did you have a libertarian moment?
No.
After you didn't? Okay.
No.
I won't say who you voted for when you lived in Canada. We don't have to talk about that.
Justin Trudeau in 2014.
Right.
It's full disclosure. I was a very normie liberal. As I said to Matt on the recent show, like I stayed in a 90s mindset for way too long.
I heard that.
Like,
it is a fun mindset.
It was great. I was working in restaurants. I was cute. Having fun. Everything was going to be fine. Sure, there's problems, but hey, it's the best system we have, right? Like, it's fine. I really bought into it. It's a Canadian thing. I thought Justin, being basically our age, child of the charter, the Canadian charter, which is sort of would be sort of our constitution in some ways, or Bill of Rights. More I think that's probably closer to it. I thought he was going to be a staunch defender of it. His dad had a massive hand in writing it. So I was like, we're going to be progressively Canadian. Well, that proved to be true in horrifying ways. What really happened, I think, in the 2020, a lot of things happened in 2020. I almost, in December of 2019, I was working in a bar. I was putting up Christmas decorations. I fell off the bar and put my hand through the back bar and almost severed my hand off. Luckily, they were able to reattach my thumb, and it works. There's no feeling in it, but it works.
Really? Okay.
So that happened. My wife was pregnant. Then, of course, the world goes absolutely mashugana.
Yes.
We had to move apartments from the place I had living in for years to a place just down the street. Thankfully, that worked out. And, lockdowns. And then that summer, my daughter, I can't remember exactly if my daughter had just been born or was just about to be born. And it was the summer of Floyd. Now, I'm in Montreal, Canada. This is an important part of it.
Back then,
right. And at that time, I'm in Western Australia at the current moment. My wife's Australian, big family. We moved down here. It'll become clear. So I'm in Montreal, Canada, living in this upper duplex. We have this big giant window in our living room. looks out into a big giant park. And it was summer Floyd, and they had a Floyd kneel-in essentially. And I saw, in my mind now, it's hundreds of people. It's probably 50 people or whatever. And I knew some of the people in that crowd. I knew the guy who organized that thing. And they're all kneeling in a direction. And I was looking at this thing and I was thinking, this is a religion. But at this time, I'm an atheist of 31 years, anti-theist, very Chris Hitchens school. I had started to soften a bit, but still very much in that frame. And I looked at that and with my skeptic brain and said, this is a religious service. What is going on? And with everything else going on, I started to have, right after my daughter was born, within a few months, I started to have a lot of emotional breakdowns, essentially. And if anyone knows me, I don't cry. I was raised by Ukrainian Polish people. Like, we don't cry. We hardly smile. It's very stoic. We get angry and sometimes a little joyous, but it's very muted. And I just started having these episodes. And what it was is that all these, as I describe it now, like all my contradictions had stacked to this point. I think of it visually as like those cartoons where you see dirty dishes by the sink just piled up, haphazardly, and they just started to fall because I couldn't maintain any of these prior assumptions of standard morality and what Canadians were, and seeing people turn on each other and get vicious, and people being pulled out of Christmas family dinners, and because there was like one person too many, and all this stuff was going on. And I essentially I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but I kind of cried out, like, what do I do? And I received a very clear voice, and this is where people think I've gone crazy, and they might be right, but this has been also confirmed by Father Turbo in a chat we had with a good father in one of your Zoom meetings.
Yes,
and
that's right.
I received a very clear voice telling me to bear witness. And I said at the time, okay, I can do that, not knowing what the hell I gotten myself into. And a week later, I was hit by this wall of shame, like very unexpected. And that kind of brought me out of it and brought me to Orthodoxy. Partly because my grandfather was Russian Orthodox. So it seemed like,
okay.
I modeled myself after my grandfather quite a bit, who was my surrogate father. So, which is where the mustache comes from as well. But, so that became like an easy one.
What
Like,
about the
where do I go?
collar shirt?
No, that's all me, my friend.
That's you. Okay. Got it.
I bring the farmer's tans. I bring the sexy. So
Based.
Yeah, exactly. Very based. So yeah, that kind of brings us up. And so then, I have a very small family that's aging out in Canada. My wife has a very big family of a lot of siblings down here in Australia. So we had the option of coming out here. So we pushed that button and shift the family out, to the other continent. And here we are, mate. G'day.
What a wonderful time to discover Orthodoxy, though, as you have a beautiful young daughter now.
Yes.
It's not the easiest thing to fall into, for sure. But that's wonderful. That's what a lot of us want, is like a beautiful daughter to raise within the church and whatnot. So very nice. You guys, well, now just you. We don't have to. We can get into the recent transition of the show or not. But now you have been discussing several themes on your show, sometimes with Matt on King Pilled, and I love it. I'm fascinated with it. It's captivated my attention. So we can get into this in any way you want, but I want to talk about this spirit of the devouring mother, which in your mind, and you've convinced me, is where we've been at for a long time. And we're kind of in the midst of a transition. Can you first talk about, I think if there's people that are into Jungian stuff and maybe Peterson, they're going to be familiar with the term devouring mother, but talk about that, and then we'll get into where that's led us and what it's looking like.
So this thought process started, shout out to Pete Canones and Paul Fahrenheit. They did a podcast in late 2023 where they were talking about, I think they've done 2 or 3 of these, more or less around the same subject, talking about the spirit of the age.
Yes.
Excuse me. And so that got me thinking about where we're at. I really did feel like we're into a new thing, that we had crossed over into a new age, and what this new spirit of the age would be, which I've dubbed the Vengeful Son. Now, to go back a bit, because then my mind went to, okay, what was the spirit of the previous age? What wokeism and all that stuff? And I believe that is attached to the devouring mother. But to even go a bit further back, I believe that this inversion started somewhere in the mid-19th century. I haven't pinpointed exactly. You can even bring it back to the Enlightenment itself. But I feel like there's been a certain spiritual inversion. In Orthodoxy, we say that God is the Lord of spirits, and when Nietzsche famously proclaimed, "We have killed God." I know there's more to the quote, but we'll go with just the basic. I believe that was a confirmation of something, that the Lord of Spirits had been pushed aside to a certain degree, at least by the ruling class. And what that does, I believe, is it invites other spirits to come in and begin to begin to work their influence without enough of a stronger pushback. So if we think of the tyrannical father, and this is a Jungian term, but you can see it if people, there's you can talk about it as like a zeitgeist, as Hegel talks about. We can say it an egregore, like some sort of, like, let's say, cultural egregore that grips people. And in the terminology of the tyrannical father, which is an inversion of let's say, the divine father, or the good father, we see the classic example is Saturn, the god Saturn, who eats his children so that they can't grow more powerful than him. What's really interesting is that if you look at like let's say the late 19th century and the early 20th century, there's a lot of Saturn imagery pops up all over the place, from Masonic temples to it's all over. I think it was RKO or one of those production houses had Saturn on it. Like, there's Saturn imagery shows up all over the place, and if you think of the characteristics of the tyrannical father, you have things like he's distant, prone to sort of chaotic anger, like sudden anger bursts. Certainly, there's a violence to it, but it's just sort of a suppressing violence. And then you think of the men from that era, and many of them were born from families of violence. They went through 2 world wars, a depression, like we would say had PTSD or but. And that framed that whole generation. Even the quiet generation, like, they're removed. They're not in some ways engaged, or if they are engaged, it's through violence. If you read the works of like Bukowski is really good with this. He wrote I forget which book he details this, but he wrote about basically growing up in I think it was the suburbs of Chicago, and just violence being standard, and everyone's angry and everyone's violent, and there's just this sort of negative masculinity, like real toxic masculinity.
Yeah,
you want to talk about that. Right. So I think you have that period of time, and it goes out, from somewhere in the, let's say, late 19th century to about 1950s. Then it starts to change over as almost a correction. As it begins to weaken, you have the devouring mother coming in. And the devouring mother, easily you can say, look, you have images of the moon. What did I write down here? It's classic that they sent a phallic rocket up to the moon, where space men, get out and almost desecrate the moon in some ways, right? Yeah. Put a flag in there, play some golf, kick around some rocks, right? Civil rights movement, even getting into environmentalism, feminism's in there, of course, as well.
Yes.
Saying that the masculine is bad, right? Tyrannical father, bad. Motherhood, femininity, good.
Yes.
But to Mother the point
Earth,
where it becomes
right.
Mother Earth, right? Man-made climate change.
Yes.
Not human climate change, man-made climate
hurting
change.
The Mother Earth, right.
Exactly. So the victim, right? The mother is the victim who takes her children away to keep him away from the tyrannical father, right? To protect her children from that tyrannical father, so she smothers them.
Yep.
She drowns her babies. She accepts them all, like, whatever keeps you safe. If cutting off your genitals makes you safe, cut off your genitals. Mm-hmm. If locking you down and destroying, sure, you may have lost all these things, but you're safe.
Yes.
You're safe. Yes. We feed you, like Nancy Pelosi said. We feed them.
Right.
This is, and again, when you start seeing it in that aspect, you see it everywhere.
Yes.
So now, let's lead us up to the woke period, which I actually looked at. There's Orrin McIntyre and AA academic agent going back and forth about are they going to put the woke away? And I think it's less that it's going to be put away than it's going to be transformed or destroyed, like actively destroyed. Because I believe that wokeism was sort of the final manifestation. Like when it's almost like when the spirit's at its strongest, it's at its weakest.
Yeah,
it's about to come down.
Right.
And
it's the roller coaster hitting the top and it's about to fall, basically.
You can think of it as almost like energy, right? It's like it's used up all its real ambient energy and now it's dissipating because it gets like one big shot at it. And of course, this is going on for 60 odd years.
Yeah.
So now we're into what I would say 2020, 2021 was a transverse point. And I've dubbed this the Vengeful Son. That's the offspring of the tyrannical father and the devouring mother. And I believe this will bring into, now I would say the symbol of the Vengeful Son would be Mars, the planet of war, right? The red planet, mysterious but strong. Like you get all these kind of things, violence. We're entering what I believe to be an age of total violence. And when I say that, I don't mean it's going to be always kinetic, although that will happen too. And we're seeing that happen quite a bit. Some of the examples I like to use, if you remember during the game stonks thing that happened, I think in 21.
Will you explain that to people? Sometimes I fear that people like us use terms that normal, and I'm not insulting anyone in my audience by any means, because Jason and I spend probably too much time online hearing these things. But explain what happened right there really quick and what that means.
I'll do my best. So there's this store called GameStop. It's a video game store. Some guys on the internet found out that a hedge fund was basically starting to short GameStop to, and I don't know these terms very well, but essentially to do some funny business to make some money off of its collapse because it was going out of business. So there was a group who got together online who then shorted the short, essentially, if I'm putting that right. And I'm sure there's people in the comments going, no, you did it. Right. You're right. I'm wrong. I don't know. Right. But essentially, this group of online add-ons were able to short out this hedge fund, this major hedge fund, and almost bankrupt them. They brought down this stock program called Robinhood. They basically put them out of business. I'm not sure where they're at now. And part of the reasoning behind it was they were going to hold the stonks, right? They started calling it game stonks. And it's like, hold the stonks. Because the idea is the longer you hold it, the more you bleed it. And they got the stock up to some absurd level, like way overpriced, beyond the value of every GameStop store in the world times 10 kind of thing. And this was hemorrhaging money out of the hedge fund. So I say all this to say that, just to get to this point and to get back to the Vengeful Son with this. At one point, one of the lead guys of this Game Stonks group was very vocal about holding the line, hold it, and basically bleed out this hedge fund. And everyone was reacting crazy, like, oh my God, we got to change the rules of stock trading completely to deal with this group of anons on the internet.
The angry people found a loophole that the rich people didn't like.
Right. And they stopped on a dime. It was pretty stunning. Anyone who wasn't who wants to refamiliarize with them, it's all online.
Yeah.
So they talked to this one kid who's basically one of the more vocal guys who's holding the stonks, and they said to him, "Look, if you keep doing this, you're going to lose all your gains. You're going to lose all your money if you keep doing this." He's like, "I don't care." He's like, "That's not the point. The point is to hurt them, the hedge fund, because those are the guys who hurt my dad back in 2008. Vengeful Son." Right? That's it. Elon Musk. I'm going to allow myself one swear word on your show, Buck, because I know you're on his. When Elon Musk tells Disney and all those other guys, go fuck yourself.
Yes.
Vengeful Son. And it's been carried over. Vivek said it. Like, you're seeing all these people kind of get their back up now and saying, no, we're not going to do that.
Trump embodied this in a way with his entire persona.
Yeah. I think in some ways he was like the avatar almost.
Beating the devouring mother.
Right? The one, and maybe that was the overreaction. The spirit is making everyone go crazy. All the devotees of devouring mother spirit just looked at Trump like, you are the worst thing possible.
Yeah, deplorable.
You are literally the tyrannical father. You're Hitler. You're this. You're that. You're everything bad in a man is you. We must destroy you. And in doing so, spend all their energy, spend all their capital on going after Trump. And in that moment, revealed what they were really after. And because that energy dissipated, in comes the Vengeful Son. Now, the the thing about this, and for any Orthodox listeners listening to this, or anyone, I think, with a conscience, the danger about the Vengeful Son is it's going to feel good. When they start going after the people you want them to go after, when Elon Musk said, go at yourself, man, it felt good. When that kid says that about bleeding the hedge fund, I get goosebumps.
Yep.
Right. Not so fun when the guy whether it was an older man in, I think it was Chile or Peru, I can't remember, somewhere in South America, pulled out a gun and shot a environmental protester who was blocking the road.
Yep.
That's also Vengeful Son. Remember, this is not just going to be the young. It's going to be across the board. It's going to affect everybody. It's the zeitgeist.
Yes, the spirit of the
There's
age.
no stopping it. Yeah,
Right.
There's no stopping this. There's no preventing it. There's mitigating it. And that comes down to you and how you react to it. And I think one of the biggest danger for anyone who's right-wing Orthodox or whatever, however you want to phrase that, is the royal path. Because it will very easily knock you off and just be like, yeah, but it feels good, right? It's the enemies. We're going to defeat the enemies. We're going to do some stuff to Skittles. Like all these things are going to be on the table, I think, increasingly so over the next few decades. And what's on us, I think, as we see these things to document it, a lot of these concepts I use as a diagnostic. And everyone's free to use it. Like, please take it and run with it. I own nothing. These are gifts from me. I often just get these inspirations. I voice them. I encourage others to do what they can with it. I will be coming out with a Substack article. I think after this talk, I'll use this as sort of a good primer for what things I've been writing. But that'll be out there. So I'll take credit to a certain degree. But also with this kind of concept, I don't want to take too much credit because then it's the Proud Boys kind of situation. I don't want some group calling themselves a Vengeful Son.
Yeah, right.
Out and saying,
hey, why?
That Mironchuk guy, man, he inspired us. Like, whoa, hey, hey,
right.
Diagnostic. Just telling you what I'm seeing and putting it in a useful term. Don't go detaching me to nothing. Don't want to be Gavin McGivenness myself. But, so yeah, that's the general premise.
I had said once, one of my pet peeves for a while was when someone goes, I tweeted this thing, but it does work for this situation, and it works for many situations. I've since kind of taken myself off that ledge. But something along the lines of when these online, I don't even like calling them right-wing guys, because if you come from an actual real tradition of right-wing philosophy like Pat Buchanan or something, that's a bit of an insult to the thinkers of the right. But for lack of a better term, these online right dudes that are hating on women and that say like, women did this to us, screw them, they're nothing, blah, blah, blah. It's like you kind of have the same energy as the feminists that were pushing back against men, but you're transferring it into yourself. And then you get this weird online back and forth between the manosphere and women that may be feminists. Some of them were feminists, but these things are really hard. They're like cancer. They're hard you can't just kind of remove the surface of it and scratch it and pretend it was a scab and put a bandage over it. Like this stuff, the rot can go deep. And so a lot of them share the same energy. It's just that the pendulum swung the opposite way. I assume you see the same?
Oh, yeah. To give people to be merciful and forgiving, which I think is really key. We're going to have to practice a lot of that, forgiving the unforgivable to certain degrees. Not their actions. Obviously, we're not going to condone anything. Vince McMahon is probably a monster and should be condemned as one. But in terms of forgiveness and in their mentality, what got them to this point? If you go along with what I'm saying, that means for 120 years, we've been living in an inverted world where we've taken the Divine Father and made it into the tyrannical Father. We've taken the Divine Mother and turned it into the Devouring Mother. We've taken the Prodigal Son and turning it into the Vengeful Son.
Well put.
So we can condemn or criticize or, whatever have you, people and their actions and their framework. But what chance do they really have?
Right.
If you're born outside of religion, you're born outside of a regio, a true, strong regio that binds people. You're born with this idea of individualism and liberalism that is itemizing you down to this single thing. A clip I just shared from one of the talks I had with Erickson was that this idea that the problem with atheism, and I can speak personally with this, is that you take it all on you. You take the entire world on you. All of morality, all of history, all of humanity itself is on your shoulders. You bear it. It's way worse than a cross, because with the cross you're given from what I understand of the Orthodox frame, is you're given that by God, and you're given a cross that you can bear. God knows what you can bear. And as you bear it, and as you prove your faith more and more, because I don't believe that your faith is ever tested, it's simply proven. As you prove it more and more, that cross gets in some ways lighter, but in some ways heavier at the same time. You're given more, but you're expected to give more as well. So this is that's the divine paradox. Mm-hmm. The ritual and reality are one. So when we think of someone like an anti-theist or an atheist who's now put the entire world upon their shoulders like Atlas and is bearing it and in denial of it as well, which is the other crazy thing. You can almost forgive them for having these weird contradictions that drive them insane, that drive them towards nihilism, where it seems logical. Because if you think you're stardust, a speck of thing, you're randomness in the world, that life is meaningless and you're just a happenstance of evolution and, a big bang thing that just happened to produce you out of complete chaos, came complete order, and don't think about it, just keep going. And what else do you have? Netflix, your job, multiple failed relationships. Maybe you do get married and have kids, but then you get divorced and your kids, you don't really raise your kids, someone else does. Mm-hmm. Or you stay married and you send your kids through all those systems and you just trust the systems. And so basically other people are raising your kids anyways. Mm-hmm. And then, then you wonder why you don't really have a relationship with them or other people or yourself or the world. And then you have these wonderful people like Bill Maher's when they go, you have a meaning crisis. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
And you know why? Because you think you're an individual.
Yes. Right.
Because you're holding on to this thing that's a conceptual gatekeep. And I know, man, it's hard. It's really hard. Mm-hmm. It's devastatingly difficult. When I had that, I told you I had that religious experience and I got hit by shame. And one of the things that came out of that is realizing that I wasn't just wrong about God. I was wrong about reality. Mm-hmm. I was wrong about everything. And I was brought just to the most humble place I could be and had to rebuild and literally moved to a different country and rebuilding in this oven. As I speak to you, it's going to be 45 degrees today. Whatever.
Which is not what. Oh my God, this guy uses hot. Celsius. He's crazy.
It's hot, man. What can I tell you? There's kangaroos, which are methed up deer. It's a very strange place to live in. But you're here and my daughter's thriving and that's all that matters. And it gives you a strength when you understand what sacrifice truly is. And you realize that, look, I will set fire to my life in some ways, but that, it'll feel like a suffering, but it's actually a grace. Your proof of faith is always a grace, and it can encounter as a suffering, but it's always going to get better. It's always going to lead to much better things if you just stick with it. And so, but no, don't let me preach here.
No, I wouldn't want to do that. Another really fascinating thing, and you always say, I didn't come up with this. It was, I said it basically, is you've been discussing a framework that is tribalism versus civilization. And I want you to get into that. And I will preface this for everyone with, as Jason gets into this is not a black pill. Often Jason calls it a bitter white pill, which he's come up with all these phrases and terms that are, I think, really relevant. So get into that. And again, people listening, as he dives into this, don't be pessimistic or black-pilled. One of the things I think we've learned, from, you could say the Machiavellian stuff, or Curtis Yarvin is, and a recent guest of the show, Jay Burden, has been echoing this a lot. We're discussing things as they are, not necessarily like this grandiose vision of how we want them to be, which is also kind of how a lot of us went through this post-libertarian phase, because within the libertarian moment, we were like, well, here's how they should be. Well, we're not describing how they should be in the moment. We're describing them as they are. So I think that's an actual, speaking in realistic terms, it's a white pill, because, I'm a firefighter. I don't get to a house on fire and go, I'm just going to picture it like there's no flames, the family's happy in there. Let's just pretend this is what I would like to see. It's like, well, that's not going to do any good. That's going to hurt everyone. So it's better to, when I give my size up on the radio, explain like, we've got a fully involved house. There's a room that looks like there's, so that's kind of what we're doing here. So I'll let you take it from here.
No, brilliant. Even down to the firefighter analogy, I couldn't say it better. Okay, we'll start off with the gut punch, and we'll build from there. Give everyone a pause. I'll look directly in the camera for this one. You don't live in a civilization anymore. And you haven't for quite some time. Now, when I say this, quite often, people don't like it. And I get it. I don't like it either. I don't not want to live in a civilization. I rather like civilization. I'm a civil person. I live in the civil frame, as I would say, a civilizationist, perhaps. We're coming up with terms. Don't worry, it's a work in progress. So, okay, story hour. How did I come up with this? Or how was it delivered to be? Is probably a better way of putting it. So, do you remember a few weeks ago or a month ago, whatever it was, a clip was going around on X of a woman in Congo, and she was crossing a river. And she was crossing the river on, I'll say bridge, but I'm being very generous with it. It was basically two sticks of very flimsy wood. And she falls in the river and loses the stuff on her head and has to wade across. And the caption before the video was, "The world has failed Congo." And I was looking at that and I was thinking, no, I don't believe the world has failed Congo. I don't even think Congo has failed Congo. I look at that and saying that woman represents, let's say, 10,000 years of being in the Congo. And I believe that I've used the term primal. As I'm calling it that, a sort of a primal frame. Now, this isn't racial. This isn't a dig on Africans or any of that. Because I'm going to prove to you that it's happening with blue-haired people with things in their faces too. So the primal frame is that, and also to give it its due, is that it's necessary in certain environments or situations. If you took a group of us and put us on a desert island suddenly, we would snap into the primal frame real damn quick because you need it. The primal frame is everything's here. It's zero time preference because everything's a crisis. That rustling in the bush could be a rabbit or could be a bear.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to choose now. And you choose wrong, the fall off is really severe.
Let me interrupt you really quick because, again, a lot of my audience, again, not insulting you, high time preference, low time preference is extremely important to realize in this conversation. High time preference means you're looking way down the road. For instance, you start a career and you're worried about your retirement and you're thinking way down the road in the future. What can I build to? What can I save? What can I provide to my family? What can I pass on to multiple generations? zero or low time preference means what can I get here in the moment right now? And I think once you have that explanation, it might help you understand where we're at if you just kind of look around your own culture. But go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And so high time preference is going to be tied into the civil frame, but we'll get there. Mm-hmm. So primal frame, short time preference, almost zero time preference, really. Everything's immediate. Everything's existential. Every crisis needs to be dealt with immediately. Because if you think about it, it's like, let's say a video game, your health bar is this big.
There you go.
Primal frame.
Yeah.
And you get one, maybe two mistakes, and then you're wiped out. And not just you, your whole tribe, like everything, right? Tribe is also really important to understand here, because some people would call this tribalist, or tribalism has been sort of attached to what I'm calling the primal frame. I'm separating this out.
Right.
I was actually calling it tribalist for a bit, and then I went on Matt's Discord, and thank God for autists, because they will work a problem and frustrate me to no end, but they'll make some really good points, and I have to walk away going, okay, yeah, you got me.
Yeah, right.
So we've made that change. But okay, so the other thing with primal frame is that they'll reuse, everything's recycled. Nothing is permanent in that sense. And it's actually hyper rational, because if you're living in an environment where one or two mistakes can kill you, suddenly you're looking at resources and buildings and all that stuff very differently. Even it doesn't have to be from nomadic people or a nomadic mindset, which is interesting now that we're talking about digital nomads and stuff. But they're just simply not. Well, they assume the tribe's going to be around. The tribe can be around for 10,000 years. They're not building a civilization around it to preserve it. They're maintaining certain skills and abilities that allow them to persevere over generations, right? So far that makes sense. Civil frame, however, this is where we get into civilization. Civil people see things very differently. They do things like build things that will last for generations. So in the bridge analogy, a civil person looks at that and goes, "Why just build a brick bridge? Build a really big metal bridge or something like that, and it'll be around forever." The other thing I've left out is that in a primal frame, and I don't know the situation with that one clip, but you could easily build a story where the person defending it would like, well, yeah, of course we don't build a permanent bridge there, because the river only runs for like 3 months out of the year during the rainy season. Most of the time, you can just walk through it. It's only a concern during that time. So yeah, we build like a very temporary thing that usually works. Maybe some of it got damaged and they hadn't fixed it yet or whatever, right? And that's why she fell in. But, we just kind of wait until the dry season and it's fine. In a civil frame, you're like, no, you build a permanent bridge, and it doesn't matter if it's raining or not. It doesn't matter if the river gets dammed up and there is no river anymore. You keep the bridge and you maintain it because it's our bridge.
Oh, man.
It's the bridge that we built, our forefathers built. It's the bridge that I remember fishing off of with my grandfather. It's the Roman bridge. Like you see these all over Europe. I think the longest lasting one's in Spain, and it's over 1,000 years old. And here's the crazy thing about this, and this is where I'm saying that civilization is irrational, actually, but within it, it creates a super rationality that only makes sense to civilizationists. Because if you're thinking about the resources required to build that kind of bridge, to overbuild it so it can last for a very long time, and then subsequent generations spending resources to maintain and do maintenance on the bridge, when you could have built another bridge, or you could build multiple bridges, probably for the same amount of resources, but you're like, no, this is important. And that led me to going, well, why is this important? Why? Okay, what is the mechanism? And this is where, from God's lips to mine ears and out to you fine people, I made a sudden connection with Nick Land. And of course, trying to explain Nick Land would take multiple podcasts. He's parallel to
Yarvin.
To Yarvin. He popularized, I don't know if he invented, but he certainly popularized the idea of accelerationism. And one of his quotes that I found very salient was that capital, as we understand it, most people would think capital is money, but you can get into metaphysic with it as well. Capital, or human capital, is produced when humans do things competently. So competency equals capital. And suddenly the light came on, because I'm like, well, hang on a second. If you're saying that competency equals capital, then terms like social capital, economic capital, and political capital are all held together by what I call a regio, or I'm using the word regio. And in Latin, regio can mean a region. It's the root for king, region in French, or there's a term for it in Italian. And it also has a tie into God. It basically means you can basically say it's that which binds, right? Which gives you a border. Well, if you combine the social, economic, and political domains, and you combine it with the regio, and humans are doing things competently. Here's an example: you're a fishing village on the Adriatic, right? A lot of fish. You get really good at fishing. You start getting good at boat building because you want to go out and get even bigger fish. And you get better at nets, and you get better at all the things that are attached to fishing, and you so on and so on and so on and so on and so forth. And over time, with the right civilizational capital buildup and reinvestment and returns, you get the Portuguese. So, fishing village to Portuguese. What do you need to do? What is the mechanism? What's the magic? How does that happen? And it happens all the time, continuously over history, in many, many places. Throughout from Greece to Egypt to Rome, all these wonderful places. Okay, what's the thing? Civilizational capital is what I'm calling it. And you have that, and the only way you can generate that is by occupying the civil frame. And that means seeing the world in a certain way that, again, is probably irrational to a lot of other people, but within the civilizational frame, it's totally rational. Singapore is a great example of this. They've really figured this one out in a lot of ways. Because it's a very operative system. Now, I'm not saying everyone should be like Singapore, but they seem to have figured this. They seem to figure the civilization thing out really successfully, and are continuing, especially as a startup. Because that's the other way I'm imagining it. You can actually kind of think of these things as almost like a startup. So that'll get us into how Matt and I want to start applying this, but we haven't got there in the series yet. But that's kind of where we're at. And so we've been doing this reading of Mencius Moldbug's, Curtis Yarvin's Patchwork, and combining it into these concepts of civilizational capital, civil frame, primal frame, and seeing where we kind of end up. So we're in the consultation phase, if we're calling it. We'll get into the recruitment phase at some other point. But yeah, and I think that this idea and this kind of concept, when you conceptualize it this way, I remember when it hit me and I kind of formalized it a bit, man, it was like, that made me happy. It was like, oh, well, we can do stuff. What do we do? Well, we don't live in a civilization anymore. Okay, so what do we do? Well, we build a tribe. Okay, and if we get a tribe together, then what do we do? Well, we start to build a village, and we start building civilizational capital. And then what? And this is the important thing, those three words. And then what is always the thing we're asking. And then what? Well, then we can answer that in individual cases, or as we build out to a more of a platform kind of idea, that we can get into that as well. But yeah, I think it's a useful kind of conceptual tool to use. And again, please, everyone start looking at it. Everyone start using it, saying it, get it out there. I want to hear Tucker Carlson say civilizational capital at some point. That would make me happy.
Yeah.
without my name attached to anything. It's okay. Because I'll know. That's all I care about.
I got to play devil's advocate for the people pushing back right now, listening to this, that are going to comment. Jason, we are in a civilization. Why do you say this? We've got firefighters and police, and I go to my job, and I'm not in a third world country. And I think at the same time, they're going to be going, well, he said competency. We're in a competency crisis. That's very apparent now, especially all you have to do is look at the heads of government to figure that part of it out, or maybe look around at different places you go to, and what does customer service look like? And I'm putting it in very surface level examples, but when the people say, Jason, I still live in a civilization, what are you talking about? Maybe you're down there in Australia, maybe it's different. What would you say?
I would say that, okay, here's a question. Here's an open-ended question for it. Let's forget about the planes falling from the sky thing for a second, which I think should be kind of all I have to say.
Alarming. Yeah.
But
the videos of the doors opening or the windows flying out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to get worse than that. I'm having a lot of people reach out to me, and I won't divulge too much information because some of it might be sensitive. But in situations where, let's say you have this is how bad things are getting, folks. Okay. And again, this is not a doom pill. It's just, you got to know where you're at.
Yeah.
And you have to know, if you won't take it from me, you're going to take it somewhere.
Yeah.
It's going to get real obvious. It's going to hit your life.
Yes.
I'm getting lots of people reaching out telling me that they know, let's say a business that has a critical safety team that's composed of, let's say, a handful of people. And they're the only people who know how to keep this business safe. And let's just say it's a pretty important business. And I'm just using one example. And if once those people die or retire or get fired because no one is looking after this division, there will be no one to keep this thing safe. And so when it does break down, because it will break down, they won't know what to do. There's literally just a piece of paper saying, hey, do these things for the replacement. But they probably won't even train. They'll have no experience. Okay.
Who didn't get there because of their experience.
Right. Now, you say to me, but that's just systems. Still in a civilization, it's just systems are bad. We'll just change the systems. We'll elect the right people to the right positions and it'll write this shit. Okay. Here's another example. I'm 46 years old, turning 47 this year. I remember the 90s very, very, very clearly, especially the mid-90s. So I remember very distinctly being 12 years old watching the Berlin Wall fall. I remember very distinctly the collapse of the Soviet Union, especially coming from a family that's Eastern European. So it was a big deal. The people who weren't really coming of age in that time don't understand the amount of hopefulness and this surge of real deal, wow, we won. The West has won. It's amazing. This is pre 9/11. This is an exuberance, mountains of cash. Everyone was making money all of a sudden. It was just it was great. So imagine that. Your civilization, quote unquote, has just won the most major victory of all time. Okay. Something that Rome defeating the Carthaginians. It's done, gone, salt of the earth, right? Massive amounts of money, capital flowing like crazy. Here's a question. Maybe, Buck, you can answer this. What did we build?
I think they might say, well, the internet.
The internet was around before that. It just hadn't been popularized. I'm saying, yeah. Did we build a statue? Was there post-World War, we built highways and massive, post-World War I, World War II, the Chrysler building, all these things came up because we had the same kind of thing. We won this big war. This big victory was achieved. We have all this capital. We're going to spend it. We're going to build these crazy things. Why? Because we're a civilization, damn it. That's what we do. We build stupidly big buildings that look cool because the reflection, and this is something that's also really important to understand, and this is how civilizations automate themselves, is that civilizations reflect the citizens and the citizens begin to reflect the civilization.
Yes.
So you don't really need a lot of laws to keep, if the civilization's really going with gas, you don't need a lot of laws. People pick up the garbage. And if you do, and they find some littering, that person gets a talking to, right? Because it's that reflects bad on me. I keep my house nice. I paint my house. I talk to my neighbors. I keep a nice neighborhood. I keep this safe. I don't, the cops are there in case things get really bad, but we don't really need them for a lot of disputes. And we're not going to get violent and shitty because, again, we don't need to. We're living in a civilization. This is our stuff. This represents me. If you lived in a civilization and I asked you, who are you, Buck? And you said American, I would be like, oh, okay. Because that comes through. You represent America. America represents you. The greatness of it represents you, and you represent its greatness. Now, can you imagine saying that when San Francisco exists in the current state it is?
Right.
You live in a civilization. You explain me California.
Mm-hmm.
You explain me the border and situation in your country. And look, I live abroad. I have checked out of a lot of things now. So I neither defend nor, like, you want to say all the bad things about Canada, Australia. I'm going to say, yes, you are completely and totally correct. I completely agree with you. No arguments here. Because the West is done in terms of a civilization.
That's
it's
key. That's
doing
key.
this other thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's doing this other thing. And it can be restored, maybe. And maybe it can be revitalized. And maybe that's what's going to come down the pike in this election. And maybe for the next 50 to 60 years, we're going to chug along and keep this corpse animated like a weekend at Bernie's. Maybe. Hopefully. I hope so. Right? For a lot of people's sake. But ultimately, we're facing the biggest problem here is that liberalism, especially individualism, is a civilizational killer. Okay, so you have the social, economic, and political domains. Those are held together by a regio. And as I said, a regio can be seen as a region, as a king, or even as a god, as a religion. In fact, you can have all three. That would be the most powerful.
You should.
There's your installation. There's your spiritual capital.
Yeah.
And this thing protects the people so that the tribe is held together. In fact, if you want to think of it as the tribe in a civilization form is like the acorn, but instead of the acorn becoming the tree, the acorn's here and the tree kind of grows up around it. So it's this layering effect, right? So whenever you're meeting a crisis as a tribe, in a primal frame, it's, whoa, got to do with it right now, right? In a civilizational frame, we're like, whoa, okay, wait. Let's consult with our priest. Let's consult with the king. Let's consult with, sorry, I got some noise. I should close that window. Sorry. Your pod service will fix this right up. You have multiple layers of defense and answers for your crises before it gets to the point of like, okay, we need to take immediate action. As you introduce something like liberalism or nominalism into this frame, you begin to erode that regio. So Nietzsche says we've killed God. We no longer have the power of religion. World wars take out monarchy. We no longer have the kings, and we could argue that Enlightenment basically took out kings anyways.
Yeah. And Christianity, but go ahead.
Yeah. And now they're going after the state. They're eroding. Individualism is destroying the state, the actual regio of a civilization. And after that, they'll go after the family, the tribe. Once they get rid of the tribe, now you're just an itemized individual. You're a little fluff of nihilism that you have no family, no history, no background, no religion, no leader. I mean, you'll have leaders, but whatever. You'll have the state. It'll be a totalizing state that tells you little individual you, what to do and how to do it. No, maybe it won't be us. We'll be maybe long dead, but it'll be my daughter or my daughter's grandkids, if she's even allowed to have children. Who knows, right? Like, this is where that gets to. And that's why, if you want the bitter white pill, is the longer you keep this thing going, the worse it's going to get. We can take this opportunity right now where the planes are falling out the skies and go, okay, we don't live in a civilization anymore. Scrap that. Don't hold on to it. It's like it's an ex-girlfriend, man. She broke up with you. She's not returning your calls. She's not into you anymore. Don't keep calling. It's getting pathetic. Every time you ask me out for pool, I know what that's code for. I don't want to hang around sad.
Right.
So we need to get people into that, break that concept of individualism equal good to no, we need to build a tribe. And went from the tribe, okay, and then what? Okay, well, let's build a village. And then what? And then what? And then what? And you might say to me, well, Jason, I don't have that. I don't have friends. I don't know my neighbor. I live on a desert island, a desert island continent with kangaroos. What do I do? I'm like, well, we have this thing called the internet, and that still works apparently. So why don't we use that? Why don't we start building digital tribes and digital villages and digital towns and digital cities and then digital civilizations. And then some along the way start to map it into meat space.
Right.
So that we can start building real towns and real places for real people to live and just populate it out that way. Because ultimately, people who are civils build. And it's like, why do we build? Because we're civils. Well, they're going to knock it down. They're going to come after you. They're going to destroy you. Okay, well, no, yeah, sure. They can. And we go, well, that sucked. We'll get back onto it. Rebuild the tribe and continue and continue and continue. Do you understand? Like, we don't stop. You can't stop the rock, my friend. You don't stop. You just keep going. And that's the solution. And I know people will oftentimes tell me that that's too much. It's too grandiose. You're crazy, Mironchuk. You're thinking too big. I'm like, okay, so what's the other thing we can do? Well, all we need to do then is, the better thing to do is solve world hunger. And then we'll fix Africa's problems. Like, oh, just solve world hunger then, shall we? Oh, well, okay. What, by Wednesday, shall we? What's the operational plan for that? What else do you got? It's all the other solutions that they're putting together are crazy. They're Sisyphusian. And they're not guaranteed to do anything other than make you feel good. This is not going to make you feel good. I guarantee you this. The other thing too, the thing I'm saying we're going to build over a long enough time frame, if I could live 1,000 years, it's going to fail.
Ew.
Probably fail multiple times in smaller ways, but we're going to keep building and learning and building and learning, and eventually, hopefully, and spoilers, we're going to start modeling the kingdom of heaven on earth. Now, I'm not saying that we are going to become gods or we will do God's work in that sense. It's that you need a model. Well, as David Gronowski once said, the story starts in a garden, ends in a city. So let's build cities.
Wow, that's a lot. I was going to ask you, and you almost...
I do talk a lot, don't I, Buck?
No, I love it. I was going to ask you, and you kind of answered it.
My critics aren't wrong.
I said that. I'm not a critic at all. But how does this tie in? You kind of answered it there, but just to detail it a touch more, how does this tie in to the Orthodox worldview?
Well, that's the kicker, isn't it? I kind of put it a little bit at the end there, but
right.
What Matt and I are theorizing is that, and I think I'm not a historian, so people can do a better job of this, but I believe that there's periods of time when if a civilization is doing well, it basically automates itself.
Uh-huh.
You can see this in laws. Like, again, I use Singapore quite often as an example, not because I want to live in Singapore, or I think it's the perfect city, or that's what we need to build, but in terms of solving problems. If you say that, okay, rape is a problem. Okay, well, Singapore's more or less solved that if we trust their metrics. They have very harsh punishments about certain things. They've solved litter. If you litter, it doesn't matter who you are, they're going to cane you. They have a homogeneous society with 3 different groups that classically don't usually get along with each other. There's tons of things you can say that if you're serious about saying that this X is a problem, and I can go, well, look, these guys have figured it out. Why don't we just do that? You go, no. Oh no, that's anti-liberal. That's not that they don't believe in individuals or individualism. It's too collective. It's like, okay, well then you don't complain about things. Like, just live with it. Live with rape or graffiti or whatever you want to live with. Because if you're in the kind of society that allows certain behaviors, you're going to allow all of them. There's no way to stop it once it's a little bit like, unrepentant sin just generates more sin.
Yes.
It doesn't, there's no stopping it at that point. So you asked, well, how does this fit into the Orthodox frenema? I'll just say, and maybe let's say extend it out to a general Christian one. If we get, so let's say, and this, again, I don't believe this will happen in my lifetime. Well, hopefully in my daughter's lifetime, but we'll see, is if we can get this thing to basically get into a automation mode where civilization is kind of taking care of itself through its people, through the civils and citizens who make up that civilization, who are informed by the civilization, or they're being reflected. They're reflecting the civilization. They take care of it without being asked. They're just, they're constantly volunteering. and we're generating enough capital to keep this thing kind of going. And with modern technology to boot, I believe we can maybe get to a point where we automate the civilization to such a point where we can concentrate on producing saints or becoming saints ourselves. Themselves,
yeah, right,
people in the future, right? Because to put in, everything's a crisis. Well, there's a saint crisis as well. Mm-hmm. We're not generating a lot of saints these days in the West, or I don't know what's going on in Russia, but so I would think that would be a noble goal to shoot for, is to get civilization to such a point where it's in good hands and it's kind of doing its job without having to be directly managed by every single person all the time, or part-time managed civilization, full-time working on becoming a saint, or as saintly as one can become in one's lifetime. I think that would be a pretty good thing to do as we build towards the kingdom of heaven. I really, right. And again, I defer to. I don't ever want to fight above my pay grade here. Right. If religion was a jiu-jitsu, it was a martial art, I'd be a white belt. I'd be in street clothes. I wouldn't be allowed on the mat. But I don't believe that we're at the eschaton. I don't think this is the end of all things. I think this is just an end. We're in an apocalypse. Things are being revealed.
Which would include a beginning, of course.
Yeah. And the Vengeful Son is going to clear house. And what does that mean afterwards? A lot of people ask me, like, what comes after the Vengeful Son? I'm like, whoa. Yeah. I'm not that good. I got this, right? I got this figured out. But anything past this point, I have no idea.
There's parts of our circles, and I don't like it at all, but it's hard to not see at certain times this fighting between the sexes. A lot of it's people younger than you and I, but it's happening. How did this devouring mother and now vengeful son play a part in this, I don't know, feminist, post-feminist, whatever you want to call it, versus the manosphere? Can you kind of tie that in what we're seeing? Because I think a lot of people are playing and fighting on this surface level without realizing the root at what they're doing. And they feel good in the moment, like to push back and fight. Well, I'm a woman, damn it, and I'm this and that, and no, but women screwed me over, and now I can't date. How does that tie into this stuff we're seeing play out? And maybe you don't know because you and I are, you're 46, I'm 47. This is a little bit of a younger generational thing, but can you tie that into what we're seeing there?
I think it's eternal.
Okay.
It's pride.
It's pride. Yeah, huge.
It's pride all the way down. Unrepentant pride, or let's say unfulfilled desire, if we want to go to a Girardian model. Unfulfilled desire. So in Girardian memetics, we'll say things like, the closer people are to each other, neighbors, let's say, and the more they can identify as each other without a lot of differentiation, the more rivalrous they will become. All desires are external. We all want the same things because other people want them. So in terms of, like, let's say we say a car or a house or a neighborhood or something like that, those are tangible goods. Those are, that can still get ugly, but the competition for those things can be mitigated by a lot of things. When we get into metaphysics, things like power or prestige or status, now we're dealing with fire. Because what is this thing? Can you hold it? Can you hold power? Is it? Where is it? So if it's here, there, everywhere. You know when you have it, and you know when you don't have it, and you know who has, and you know who doesn't. Unfulfilled desire will always produce resentment. If you're the loser, you're going to hate the winner. Now, I'm not saying you have to. I'm saying most people do. You take this and you remove religion or any kind of moral framework. As again, the atheist has it all on their shoulders, trying to convince themselves they're a very good person with having no proof whatsoever of that claim. They're just not in jail. Well, good for you. So now you have this situation, and as I said, we've been in an inverted world for quite some time. So I don't blame the feminists nor the red pill reactionaries for, I can put the weight of their actions, I don't take their agency away by this statement. But the forgiveness will come from understanding that, they do not know what they do. Girardian memetics predicts this, that they will chase a desire and they will get into fights and they will burn down, they will destroy their lives, in a rivalrous mentality of, I hate that person. You don't have no idea why you do. Like, they're pissed me off. They're this, they're that, they're awful. You make up all these reasons. You scapegoat them. You put all the bad things of the world upon them, right? So that you can freely go, well, even if they succeed where I fail, well, they're a bad person. They're cheaters. They're using the system wrong. They're using their feminine wiles, or, it's a boys' club, or whatever excuse under the sun, to try to take that bile of resentment, that taste of bitter resentment out your mouth. That would be my stab at it. So what's the cure is, well, I one of my sayings I use for myself is get humble, stay grateful, and be useful. And I feel that humility itself is a cure for resentment. It's hard to be resentful. It's hard to be, let's say, prideful if you start getting yourself real humble. Like I said, I'm a maintenance worker right now. That's my day job here in Australia. I won't dox myself, but anyways, a few weekends ago, I went on my day off and had to clear out the dunnies, which is the compost toilets. So I'm up to my elbows in human waste.
Wow.
I'm doing this because I had gloves on. Don't worry. This this a Vince McMahon story, but
right.
But I was scooping out the dunnies, and it's not a fun job.
No, it sounds shitty.
Yeah, it's the shittiest part of was the shittiest part of my week. But you do it because it needs to be done. Because it needs to be done to maintain this place that I care about and that other people care about and that's worth caring about. And again, this place is bigger than me. It's more important than me. So that's your humility. So you do the shitty things to maintain it. And I think a lot of people don't have anything like that. They hate their job. They hate their life. They've been convinced to hate their parents. Maybe they have good reasons. I don't know. They hate their country. They hate their leadership. They hate. Resentment. They have things I don't. But it's like, I could give it to you all. I could give it to you. Right. What are you going to do with it? These people are occupying a primal frame.
Yes.
And you could give them all the wealth in the world, and they just wouldn't know what to do with it. They wouldn't be able to build with it. Right. Because they're checked out from it. So, as what Matt and I are saying, like, I'm done trying to wake people up. I don't want to wake people up. It's like I could spend all my time and energy waking people up, or I could spend all my time and energy trying to build things, and I'm going to do the building thing. And if they get to a point where if they're useful or want to jump in and, pass the individual intellectual gatekeep, come on board. Let's see what we can do with you. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, it's like you got to cut the cord at some point, and that's where we're at.
Yeah, that was. We can wrap it there. This has been great. That was actually a great way to end this as well. Now you get to plug anything you want, and you mentioned that Substack, so don't forget that too.
Two-Bit Podcast. We are on YouTube. We are on Substack. We are on Spotify, iTunes, podcatchers, all the things. On Substack, I've been teasing writing articles. It's weird. It's a weird thing, right? I can jump on this format and half drunk, which is not what I was doing today. Thank you. Right. Out of respect. But just make a total ass of myself. And with my face showing the whole thing, right? And I feel nothing about it. ask me to commit this to paper. I'm like,
yes.
I don't know about this. I got to think about this one. Mm-hmm. So it's coming, folks. I guarantee. I mean, hopefully, Buck, I can use some of the stuff we talked about today in an article, and we'll do it that way. So yeah, stuff is happening. Stuff is going on. We've made a little bit of changes with the show. My co-host Mark Aaron has left to do his own thing after we had a few conversations. There's no hard feelings. It's just had to happen. These things happen. I love Mark. He's 20-year-old friend. I love him like a brother. That will never change for me. He's got a new channel coming up.
At Liberty.
At Liberty. Yeah, that'll be on YouTube. So go support him there if you know us from the show. Mark's a very, very intelligent, brilliant guy. Hopefully, Buck, you'll have time to get him on at some point in the future. And I wish him all the success and all the luck in the world. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So
excellent. Jason, that's not a knife. Thanks for being here, man.
It's not a knife, mate.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for being here on Counterflow. What a great discussion. Jason is a genuinely good guy. I really love chatting with him. I love hearing his stuff. So go subscribe to his show as well. And of course, subscribe to this one on our YouTube page over at Counterflow with Buck Johnson. Every Tuesday night, these drop premiere right around 7 p.m. Central Time. Counterflowpodcast.com is the website. It's got my stuff on there. If you want to reach out to me, you can follow me on Twitter at BuckRebel, BuckRebel. Find our Telegram group. We had a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun in there. And until next week, friends, you guys have a good one.
You get split in half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.